The sexual ethic of the Apostle Paul is also not transferable to today in anything remotely approximating an authoritative way. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and yesterday I made a video where I pointed out the prohibition on same-sex intercourse in Leviticus 18 and 20 is not transferable to today because it is socially and historically contingent, and it is reliant on specific contexts, and it is based on wildly outdated and scientifically inaccurate ideas about human sexuality. And predictably, a lot of people who, as I pointed out, are more interested in finding proof texts for their structuring of power in favor of right-wing authoritarian identity politics responded that Romans 1 proved me wrong, as if Romans 1 has absolutely any bearing whatsoever on the transferability of the rhetoric of Leviticus 18 and 20 to today. But the sexual ethic of the Apostle Paul is also not transferable to today because it is socially and historically contingent. It is reliant on specific context. It is based on wildly outdated and scientifically inaccurate ideas about human sexuality. Now, two things to keep in mind about Paul's sexual ethic. One, Paul expected Jesus to come back any day now. And so one rule that he had for all of his congregations was that everybody stay in the circumstances they were in when they were called by God. No big life changes. Pregnancy, huge life change. So procreation was not a part of Paul's sexual ethic. The other thing to keep in mind is that Paul's sexual ethic was based on a Greco-Roman Jewish worldview, which was influenced by Greek philosophical conventions, which viewed sexual desire and sexual activity as a function of the baser urges of the flesh. This was something that was better overcome, which is why Paul thought everybody should be celibate. But he recognized not everybody was blessed with the spiritual gift of asexuality. And so for those who cannot hack celibacy, he said it's better to marry than to burn with sexual desire. Why? Because if abstinence builds up that sexual desire, it's going to get out of control at some point, and you're going to engage in sexual immorality. And the perception of sexual immorality was also based on Greek philosophical conventions and ideas about human sexuality, which again, wildly outdated, scientifically inaccurate. Paul thought of same-sex attraction as a product of God removing the ceiling that had been placed on sexual desire. And so Paul describes it as something that only happens within Gentile populations because Gentile populations have ignored natural theology, are worshiping the created over the creator, and so God has removed that restraint that is placed on sexual desire, allowing it to bubble over and go in all kinds of directions. So Paul does not have any understanding of a sexual orientation that in any way, shape, or form whatsoever resembles what we understand today about human sexuality. Paul's sexual ethic is socially and historically contingent, is reliant on specific context, and on the notion that nobody should be procreating because Jesus was coming back any day now, and it is based on wildly outdated and scientifically inaccurate understandings of human sexuality. And because of that, his sexual ethic is not transferable to today. And one of the clearest indicators of that is that when people want to transfer Paul's sexual ethic to today, they ignore the majority of it. They only transfer that homophobia. Again, because the priority is finding a proof text for conservative Christian homophobia so that it can be leveraged to structure power and values and boundaries in favor of that right-wing authoritarian identity politics. Because identity politics are a hell of a drug. And the fit for this video has been Spider Punk.